My name is Rebecca Bruner, and I'm on the board here at the Museum on Main. We are here today, October 21st, 2024, I believe, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Ann Doss.
And my name is Pfaff Doss.
Oh,
but
okay.
I was known during my days here at the museum as Ann Doss. So
Okay.
I go by both.
So, when you say your days at the museum, what did you do here?
Oh, well, I was the curator
Okay.
from 1981 to 1987. So, which meant that I didn't begin in this building.
Okay, where did you begin?
I began at the Amador Livermore Valley Historical Society. Was founded, I think it was in 1963. By 71, they had obtained the old administration building at the fairgrounds
Okay.
to be a museum.
Now, is that the building that the
Superintendent, the Alameda County Supervisor,
uses now?
Mhm,
Okay.
right. And so they were all excited. They got a whole bunch of donations. Unfortunately, nobody cataloged them when they came in.
Oh.
But people brought all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
The first curator was Bill Ray. And Bill was actually later involved with the Livermore Heritage Guild. He was quite well known in the valley. He was something of a handyman, and he built these platform exhibits, kind of like what we see here in this room.
Oh, okay.
Around the museum, and then also built a case, a built-in case, display case. So he was as I say, the first curator. The museum at that time had very little foot traffic from the community because it was out on the fairgrounds.
Right.
The fairgrounds gate, was kind of a psychological bar. But during the fair, they had a lot of traffic. So the second curator, Ann Lewis, who was Judge Lewis's wife, he was a Lewis Shannoni.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that Lewis. She came across kind of two ideas, is that she would have all kinds of historical societies come and display during the fair. So it wouldn't just be the Amador Livermore Valley Historical Society or just the Amador Livermore Valley. It would be all of Alameda County. So she coordinated with all these other entities, and they would come every year and put up their exhibits and promote their own. We would we'd provide the volunteers to man the museum, but they would all bring their stuff. The other thing that she started was something called suitcase exhibits or traveling exhibits.
Oh.
And Olive Hannafin, who used to be a well-known teacher here, was one of the guiding lights of that. And they put together, actually in old fruit boxes, a collection of artifacts, and then the docent would go out to third grade schoolrooms and talk about the various artifacts. There was one on ranching and one on toys, and I can't remember, one on Indians.
Oh.
And so we would have reproductions. There was a guy in town that had a gallery whose brother made Maloney-style artifacts.
Oh.
And so we, reproductions of them.
Yeah.
And so we would buy stuff from him to supplement this case. The next museum curator, third one just before me, was a gal by the name of Paige Finney Mosier. And her husband, Dan Mosier, some people may have read his books. He wrote a lot of books about Tesla and other valley sites. He was kind of a geologist, historian person.
Okay.
And she pretty much continued it. But the museum was becoming kind of, a little bit run down by the time that I was hired. I was actually interviewed by members of the board in the upstairs room of that building for the job. I had one competitor who was a junior librarian that they were considering. I had spent 7 years at the Bancroft Library as an archivist, and by the time I had was ready to leave, I was essentially running the History of Science and Technology program. My boss had moved on. He went to the Smithsonian, took leave of absence for a long time, and I, was filling in for him. So I was doing 12 interviews. I was writing articles for Bancroftiana about the various people in the society. I was coming out. Wenty, the older Wenty, anyway, Carolyn's mother, they knew that Hexel was closing down, and they had a bunch of fuse works artifacts there with the Hexel Livermore plant.
Okay.
So they thought, well, we can't give it to any of these local historical societies. So they called up the Bancroft Library, and guess who went out and did the Hexel collection? It was me, soon to become
involved in, yeah.
So anyway, I showed them all this stuff. Well, we have to think about this. We've got this other lady who's a junior librarian.
What's a junior librarian?
It's a library assistant.
Okay.
She wasn't I don't even know if she was a librarian. My situation at the Bancroft was that the head of the manuscripts department wanted me to take over when she retired. But I would have had to have gotten a library of science degree. And at that time, there was no archival. I said, well, so I'll spend 2 years studying stuff that I'm never going to use, right?
Yeah.
So didn't want to do that. They could have made me the head of the History of Science and Technology program, but there's a certain snobbiness in academia, and I didn't have a PhD. So those two doors were closed to me. And at that time, faithfully, I went to a exhibit on Phoebe Apperson Hearst, which was in one of the vacant buildings of Stone Ridge Mall in, I guess it was late 1980. And so I thought, well, it would be interesting.
And had the museum put that on?
Yeah.
Was that when the mall was just coming into its own? So
they had these, kind of like Hacienda rented or gave out building for nonprofits for their events. So this was in one of the, it was upstairs, I can't remember which store it became. But sitting at the desk was a gentleman, a tall gentleman by the name of Herb Hageman. And I got to chatting to him about it and about the Historical Society. And he said, oh, well, we're looking for a curator. Paige Mosher was leaving. And so I said, oh, okay. So then I saw it in the paper and applied. And then, as I say, I went for that interview.
Yes.
Anyway, so they hired me. And it was at the fairgrounds in that building. The first day I went there, I actually cleaned my desk with soap and water. That's how the building had been kept. So, and the first thing I realized was that here we're out in the middle of nowhere, essentially, as far as the residents were concerned. And during the fair, of course, we're promoting everybody, so we can't promote ourselves then. So what are we going to do? So my first thing was publicity. Get publicity any way I can. And the other thing I realized was that the newspapers, there'd be some kind of a heritage something or other come up, or November, whatever they would talk about old times. And I discovered that the way they got the history that they wrote up was they just went to the files at the newspaper. So of course all these myths and stories were being perpetuated because nobody ever fact-checked anything. So I set myself up to become the go-to place for when somebody had to write a story. So I made friends with as many reporters as I could.
Good.
All the newspapers. And, as I say, we try to be the source of information. And the other thing I thought was, we've got to do something that, lets the community know we exist. So I thought about a walking tour. There's a lady by the name of Margot Patterson Doss, who had done walking tours, kind of famous, and she had actually come to Pleasanton. I spoke to her on the phone when I was doing it, and she said, oh yeah, Pleasanton, nice place, but all those gravel trucks on First Street, yuck. So she never wanted to do a walking tour because of our gravel truck.
Oh, my goodness.
So anyway, so I thought, well, I was calling her to see if she had any tips. And, she get the gravel truck off First Street. What's her tip? So, okay, so I set about, and I didn't want to do histories of buildings because I didn't feel secure enough in my background to do that. I didn't want to, do something that had a bunch of errors in it.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll go from an architectural perspective, and I'll put in whatever history I have, but mostly I'll talk about the different styles of the building. So I'll pick different kinds of buildings and talk about those. So I'm doing this on a shoestring.
Yeah.
The museum had no money. I did talk to Harry Harding over at Community First National Bank, and he said, oh, well, we'll pay for the printing. And I got Pleasanton printers to agree to do the printing. But then I had to go around with my little black and white camera and take all the pictures of the buildings. And then to save money, I took a night school class at Dublin High to teach you how to, print negatives, develop film and print negatives. And so I printed them all. And then my brother-in-law at the time was working for IBM, and he got me a deal on an IBM correcting selectric typewriter. And so I picked a nice font and typeface and laid out the whole book. So they were still, I don't think they have any more, but they were still selling it here 10 years ago.
Oh.
You might remember it, kind of a yellow covered book.
And what was the name of it?
It was just Pleasanton, and I tried to do like a 19th century thing on the and spacing it in like a triangle, which was interesting on the correcting selector. But it was for a book for the edification of the residents of Pleasanton or something like that. And I never copyrighted it or put my name on it. There's a copy in the library, the museum library, because Cherie Hendershaw told me that she had cataloged it and had put my name on it.
Oh.
So it is there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was then. Then.
Well, and you were doing all this, I think, and you told me you got $50 a month?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a shoestring budget, both for the museum and for you.
And for
yes,
me.
yes.
And so I was putting on exhibits. Pretty much the platform exhibits, I didn't change that much. The only problem I had with them was, and it's kind of a problem with these too, is that you can't actually, if there's a cap there, you could actually reach in and take that cap and walk away. It was the same thing. They were all open.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, we did have a book stolen out of it. Then there was this big case, and so I'd put changing exhibits in that. And then Ann Lewis had acquired 2 huge cases, big oak cases from the Oakland Museum on loan. I hear the museum either trashed them or sold them not too long ago. And I told them, you might want to call the Oakland Museum and ask them if they want them back.
Yeah.
But nobody did.
Okay.
Nobody asked me. So
Okay.
Anyway, they're no longer here, but they were here for many years.
Yes.
You probably remember them. Yeah. So those were from the Oakland Museum. So we had those, and so I would fill them up with a theme. I did something on the lab one time, something on the wineries.
But you had no other staff working with you?
No, all the volunteers.
Okay.
So I would have, and it was kind of hard to get volunteers again. We were out in the fairgrounds, and people didn't want to come in. I got onto the program where kids were trying to earn points, I'd have them come and do stuff. I had one kid that was up in so there's kind of like a dormer window in the top of that, and so you could step out on the roof. He went upstairs to do something, and the next thing we knew, he was coming in the front door, and I said, how did you get down here? Oh, I fell off the roof. The heater blew up once. It was an interesting place.
Yes, yes.
But anyway, so I cut my teeth on putting together exhibits as I had done at the Bancroft. I had done some exhibits there too. of stuff related to history of science and technology. And so we were, rolling along doing that.
So how did you get this, how did it transpire that you got this building?
Yes. I was not that involved in that. First I heard about it was Bill Appert. Well, it was in the newspaper that I think it was 83. Anyway, I think it was about 83.
Okay.
October 83. Maybe it was 82. Anyway, that the police vacated the building. And so there was this, what do we do with it? Like the city. And of course, the city doesn't want to, create something and maintain it. They didn't really have any city offices that wanted to come here. The place was a mess. You can't believe what it looked like. Oh yeah. The windows had all been converted into these metal windows, ugly metal windows. The place was completely covered with ivy. And inside it was just, they had made it into like squirrel cages to have little offices here and there. So it was pretty bad looking. So nobody sort of really wanted to take it on. However, there were two contenders, and that was the Volunteer Center at that time. Betty Stallings' organization was very popular at that point. And the museum, we were mom and apple pie, as Dave Morrow used to say. So, we had the mom and apple pie, and they had, kind of the sexy pizzazz of a very successful organization.
Yeah.
Somehow, and Bill Apperson was the first one that told me, the police office is vacant. Why don't we, make that we should make that our museum. So I said, oh, okay. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
So, but it seemed like the board kind of took over from there, Bill and Dave Marr, and there was a guy, Alan Campbell, I think, was the other guy, was the president at the time. I didn't even really know him. I found the name in my notes, and I wonder who that was. But anyway, so they went to we all went to the city council and said our piece, and somehow a deal had been cut before that city council meeting. So the Volunteer Center said, okay, we'll settle for the house behind. You give us that, and the museum can have the front. We also had the Downtown Association on our side, because the Downtown Association was afraid of a lot of traffic. And they figured, well, the museum's going to be foot traffic. We're not going to have, a whole bunch of people in and out parking like we would with the Volunteers.
Okay. And was the Downtown Association already in this building?
No.
Where were they located?
They were located in, what's the number of the building? It's the one that became, it was Teddy Bear Express. It's probably before your time, too. And it was a building, I forget what's in there. I think it's a Japanese restaurant now. And it's got kind of like a front part, and then it had a back part. And the Chamber of Commerce was in the back part of it. Okay. That's where they were. And then they moved over, and they were in a building that's since been torn down at the Luki Park. It was next to the bus stop. Okay. So Lions, and the Lions used to use a ticket, and the Chamber was in there. Anyway, so no, the story of the Downtown Association comes much later, and I will tell you that story.
All right.
The connection between. But at that time, it was just a matter of they were looking at the overall traffic pattern in downtown.
Okay.
They thought a museum would be a much better thing. So they went to the city council and supported us as well.
Good.
So through luck, magic, pushing here and there, whatever, we got the building. And the first day I came here, which was the first day that it was vacated to us, this was another thing. A lot of things sort of just happen, and I don't know, to this day, I don't know who told who, did what, whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, so I show up,
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of stuff piled up in the back, trash, wood and stuff, and the JCs were here, led by Charles Huff. And he said, oh yeah, here we are, clearing it out. Okay.
Thank you.
Nobody mentioned.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And he also had somehow become known as our architect. Now, I can understand why Charles wanted to do this. I don't know kind of who suggested it to him, but Charles was fairly new, had fairly new business in Pleasanton. He hadn't been here very long, and he was looking to promote his business.
Right.
And nothing could be better than team up with, and by this time Callahan Pence had expressed an interest, and nothing better.
An interest
in in supporting the museum project.
Okay.
And so nothing could be better than to hitch your wagon to the biggest, comet in town. So that's
Now-
my suspicion.
Okay, so timing. They were already building Hacienda Business Park, or that was
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
at the time?
I think, well, actually, there was a referendum before they could start. They all had the planning and everything, and then there was a referendum to have it built. So there was an even bigger, there was a really big push to make Hacienda Business Park popular.
Okay.
And anything connected to it popular. So
Okay.
I think that's the time. And it may have been Dagmar that went to Joe Callahan. I don't know. I mean, she was involved with the Republican Party and the Farm Bureau for years and years.
Okay.
And so she would have been pointed out to him as a mover and shaker.
And she was on the board.
And she was on the board. Yeah.
Okay, and we're talking about Dagmar Fulton.
Fulton. Right. Dagmar Orloff Fulton.
Okay, so her family was an old family in Pleasant.
Well, at least from the 20s.
Yeah.
20s and 30s.
Okay.
They owned the Orloff Farms,
Yeah.
originally Orloff, Hanson and Orloff Dairy, and then it was Orloff Farms. And Tom Orloff, her nephew, became the DA for Columbia County.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's in the book,
Okay.
Cruising Down Memory Lane,
Okay.
available at Town Center Books. I have to say that. Donna would kill me if I didn't
Yes,
put it in my
yes.
club.
Yes.
Anyway, so, as I say, these things kind of all swirled around me because I wasn't in on, that part of it. I was taking care of the museum. I was, my task for this building was to design it. So I had to come up with, okay, so.
That's a big task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I talked a little bit with Ann Lewis, and she gave me an idea. Just essentially said, good luck, kid. So this room, which is now your main history
Yes.
room, was our storage area. We didn't have the storage building in the back. That came many years later.
That was added on?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was an add-on in the 90s. So this was our storage room. And one of the things that I wanted to do to make because it was small, the building was small, to make it more interesting was I wanted the doors to have windows in them so that you could kind of see the volunteers working in here and see some of the other artifacts.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when they delivered the doors, they didn't have windows in them. The guy said that would be too expensive, so we didn't do it. So anyway, so then the other thing, I had this long hallway, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? And I thought, well, I need to have interest in the community. And the museum is nice, but in order to get people in here on a regular basis, we should have an art gallery. So I had them design the walls. They're flat now, but I had them curve out. And they put a covering on it so that we could put tacks and pins and nails in it without them showing when you took it off. I guess that's kind of the fabric that they have now. But as I say, it was done in kind of waves so that it would be more visually interesting as an art gallery. And then I teamed up with the Pleasant Art League. And then I can't remember the name of the gal that was the head of it, but she arranged for the various artists. We had a monthly or bi-monthly art show. They would come and hang their stuff. We'd have a little reception, and we'd get people in that were just interested in the artist.
Yeah.
So that was another way to,
To get people in the building.
Then the room that is the exhibit room changing
The
exhibit
fireplace
room now.
room? Yeah.
Yeah, the fireplace room. That became the main exhibit room. Some of the other things, well, we knew there had been a fireplace, but there was no mantle.
Oh,
So the carpenter and I came up with the idea of just sort of an Art Deco plain mantle. And if anybody ever takes it off, he put his name in a piece of paper in the back on the right-hand side. Easter egg for you. Then we needed a hearth, because everything had been stripped off. And one of the guys from what's the name of the, I'm blanking on the name of the, who's Cal something. I'm not going to find it right away. Anyway, the main contractor building contractor for the Hacienda Business Park, they were assigned to us. And so one of the guys, his name was Jax, Jax, and he had worked on a job where they had a slab of marble, and he said that would make a really nice hearth for you. So it's still there. It's not original. It was donated by the contractor. The other thing that we discovered was that there are these big sliding doors. Those had been covered up by the police. I don't think those had been known since the
so
days.
they were back in the wall?
They were back in the wall.
Oh.
And there was a false wall in there. And so when the JCs tore that out, then we discovered, or actually Charles discovered those double doors. So we put something on them just to kind of stabilize them and left them, because that to me was a really good idea, because it meant that your exhibit area could be closed off.
Yes.
And when I'd have school kids in, I would have them out in what's now the front or the store area.
Okay.
I'd have them there, and then I'd open up the big doors and reveal the exhibit, and then they could go in and talk about the exhibit. It took me a little drama to the deal. The other thing that I wanted was I wanted where the office area is now was the office area, but I had it like a lattice work so that you couldn't actually just reach in. You could see, but and then the other thing I wanted, because at the old building I had to go around to about 6 places to turn off all the lights. So I said, I told the electrician, I want one panel where I just flip switches and that turns everything off. So you'll notice that
that's what we have, and that's it's lovely.
And that's why.
Yeah.
And then the room now that Ken has his office was my workroom. So that's where we put together all the exhibits. It was in that little room. So we had, and one other kind of a cute story was that in the bathrooms, you'll notice that the sinks are a little bit higher than in a regular bathroom. That was a mistake. They had ordered kitchen sinks and to go in there by mistake, kind of like my mistake of not getting the glass doors. So a mistake that I have loved for years, being a tall person.
Yes. Well, now the basement, was there a root cellar door to the basement at that time?
Yeah, there was a way to go down there. I mean, we kept very little down there because it was not very good condition. I mean, we used to keep the donated wine for events and that kind of stuff down there. And then, we did have the kitchen fitted out so that, it's a very small kitchen. But
Yeah.
you could,
Had a
use it,
place, yeah.
right. Then the other thing that I really wanted was, I was trained as an archivist to the extent that I was trained in history. And so I wanted an archive. At the old museum, there was very few records on anything. And the photographic collection was a big cardboard box up on that second story with just a whole bunch of miscellaneous pictures in it. And it was stuff that had been collected from the other, the Alameda County exhibits, that Ann Lewis or whoever thought was a nice picture, or they could use in an exhibit. So it was all kinds of stuff. So I while I was still working at the Bancroft before I started at that museum, I was, before I started at the other museum, I had brought home a bunch of acid-free boxes. They're still there. Some of my old Bancroft used boxes are still being used in the archive. And then I got onto the places that we used to order from at the Bancroft, and got some new ones too. And then started, arranging all the photographs. And initially, what I had was index cards. So you'd have to be P6 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then under P6 would be a description of what it was, and then there'd be a card under a subject that would be P6. So it was Main Street, 1915. So you'd have Main Street general photographs of Main Street 500 block. Would be the other. And that lasted for a good long year. I hear somebody just threw them away. So I hope they got the information off them before they did.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Because we didn't write on the back of, there was some that had some stuff written on the back that they came that way. But in general, everything was the card file. So to do that, that was the one thing that was a local group. It was not Callahan Pence that did it. And that was the Rotary. And it was Bill Graham who owned the Jewelers Gallery across the street. And he was very interested in history and had set up the Jewelers Gallery as kind of a historical looking place, Wild West looking place. And so he said, well, Rotary will take over, what do you want me to do? And I said, I want an archive room. And so he said, okay, how do you want, we'll do that. How do you want it done? And I had always remembered the Morrison Library at Berkeley. It's just like a gentleman's sitting room.
Okay.
And I thought I want it to feel like that, like you're in your own personal library, but it'll be the archive. So anybody coming in and using it, feels very comfortable. And they got this cabinet maker who was a member. He did all of those book cabinets for free. Bob Graham went and got the castings that are, at the top of the lights in there. He got those. He got the antique lights that were there. He bought a table, which I hear that Heather Hagen Rizzoli bought later at the museum sale. We had a lady walk in and she said, what can I do for you? My son owns the Oak Warehouse. And I said, well, I need 4 chairs for this table. So we got 4 chairs from the Oak Warehouse.
So people were just,
And I had a map case. I wanted a map case because we had oversized things. This guy built the map case. It's still in use. It's a beautiful map case. Had it slanted so that you could, pull out the drawers and then put the stuff on top and look at it. We didn't do anything with the safe. It was open, and we figured, well, nobody's going to bother with it, so we won't put a lock on it. And we put low-level daguerreotypes and some things that were a little bit sensitive in that area. Then the lighting, as I say, I had this guy from the lab that did the spotlights, but we had those the lights that are down in the fireplace room. Those were somewhat original. I don't know how original, but they had been uncovered. Then the platforms. Okay, so like I say, we had platforms at the museum on the fairgrounds, but I didn't like the fact that people could reach into them.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, okay. So I went around to a lot of different small museums and looked at what they had. All of them, they entered from the back in order to change the exhibits. I didn't want these things to be static.
Yeah.
I want them to be changeable.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any way that I could have them go in from the back because the back was the outside wall. So I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I sat down with one of the contractors and I said, okay, I want kind of like the lattice work that I have in the office. I want this lattice work. This was our kitchen exhibit. And he was-
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it was there, and then there was a base. It was a solid base.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, I'm going to have little old ladies changing these exhibits. I can't have some big heavy thing. So they designed it so that it was lightweight, so we could pull out the centerpiece of the base and just move it to one side. And
Okay.
the lattice part could just be taken down. And then you had clear access to the thing.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so we changed those. The only one that stayed kind of permanent was the blacksmith shop. That was one of the ones from the old museum too. And I had a couple of volunteers that just sort of took that over as a project and recreated it for me.
Oh.
That one I didn't put lattice work on because the stuff was heavy and it was
Yeah.
to the back, so I wasn't worried about it. That was the other two we did change, particularly the one there was this. So there was the blacksmith shop was back towards the back door, and then where Sarah had her office.
Yes.
That was this exhibit, the 1930s kitchen. And then over in the other corner, so it would be to the right of the fireplace, we
Yes.
had kind of a corner cut off, and that was our most changing one. And we
Okay.
had all kinds of different things in there depending on what we were highlighting
Yeah.
in the rest of the story. I also found in going around, there was two things that I really wanted for the kitchen exhibit. I wanted it to be a sensory experience. I'd gone to too many things where it was so static that, maybe, there's, grandma's egg beater or something.
Yeah.
But it was too static for me. So I wanted smell-o-vision. I wanted it to smell like soap.
Oh,
So I went to Clorox and I said, what do you put in your soap that makes it? You've got to put something that enhances the smell. Unfortunately, they told me all of this is soap. We don't put any scents in. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know if they didn't want to give away their trade secret
Or
what,
whatever,
But,
yeah.
But I thought, well, I can't have cans of soap.
Yeah.
So I got an air freshener, one of those things that you plug in.
Yeah.
That would kind of do it. And then I thought, well, okay, so that takes care of smell. What about sound? Because again, these places are pretty quiet.
yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, 30s music. I had been listening to, one of my hobbies was old radio shows and old music. And so I made up these 90-minute tapes of songs from the 30s, 20s and 30s, and had this tape running. And I really enjoyed it. And I know
Yeah.
I had a couple of young girls come in one time, obviously just to use the bathroom. But one of, when they're coming, one came out before the other, and she's kind of looking around. And her friend goes, oh, come on, let's go. She says, no, I want to listen to the music. So I thought, yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, I always felt that it was it's just, we were a small place, we were
And you
we're
wanted
local.
something to
And
attract people.
Yeah, I wanted something different.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
something you wouldn't get at the Oakland. I can't do the Oakland Museum.
No.
But I could do something that the Oakland Museum didn't do.
Yeah.
And so that was my plan. So,
So, so Charles was hired as architect?
no,
If I
there
may-
was no
no.
hiring.
Okay. All right. So he just,
He became the, one day he told me, or I think I read it in the paper, that he was the architect.
But
I
he
thought,
was not
oh, that's interesting.
paid or anything?
No,
Yeah.
and he didn't come around.
Oh.
I mean, I think he decided on the paint job on the outside. We did
Okay.
talk at one point,
Okay.
because he was the architect, I learned. And I said, well.
But he didn't design the interior?
Oh, no.
You
not
did
at
all that?
I did all that.
Okay.
Yeah. And supervised the carpenters
Okay.
that did
Okay.
it. The only thing that he did was, I knew from the one old photograph that we had of the library and the doors, that the doors had all been redwood. But I didn't want to, we couldn't do redwood doors, obviously, too expensive.
Yeah.
And we couldn't paint them redwood color because that would be too dark.
Right.
So what we did was we decided on and this was Charles' suggestion, was we decided on a light color, an off-white. And then the trim around the doors was in the red. And then in that, when you first come in the foyer, he had like a little line of that red repeating on one of the boards up there. And I think he may have come up with the outside colors too. But as far as I know, that's the extent of his contribution. Yes, I'll do that.
So how did you fund this renovation?
Well, as I say, all the stuff. Well, we had fundraisers. We had actually the biggest, most popular event in the valley that didn't make any money. Was the what were they called? They were male strippers, and there was the guys that owned the country store, which was where Bocce's is now.
Okay.
It was a little, variety store, and they were gay. I learned that there was a sub rosa gay community in Pleasanton in the 80s.
Oh,
I don't know if there still is, but there were quite a few guys, and these guys knew other guys, so then I would get in contact with them. There was actually an architect among them, but there were these gals. As I say, it was 80s were sort of the Wild West in Pleasanton.
Okay.
We had all kinds of folks coming in, and wheelers and dealers, and I don't know if they were attracted by the fact that Hacienda was being built or what it was, but there was a lot kind of stuff going on. Anyway, so these two gals wanted to start their own production company, and they wanted to put on an event. And they had talked to these guys, and these male strippers were really popular at the time. And so they decided that they wanted to do an event with them. The guys knew them, and but they needed a nonprofit to do it. So they came to the museum. Sure, why not? We want money.
Yeah.
And so it was this huge. It was not very well run. It was this huge event that the guys at the store told me later that the two ladies were fawning over the male strippers, who they informed me were, of course, all gay, and were not interested in them in the least. So it was. I can't even remember where it was. We were out in some big barn affair in North Pleasanton. Maybe one of the Hacienda empty buildings.
But it didn't make any
But
money?
Why? They had mismanaged it, so that it, we got, or at least the museum got no money out of it. They swore that they got no money out of it too,
but yet it was well attended.
Oh yeah, I mean it was a talk. Not only was it such a big talk of the valley, I mean we have people coming from all over, but there was a gal that owned a lingerie shop on Main Street. And she actually put on an event for the husbands. There was a lingerie show that was on the same night. So it was that popular that somebody else was cashing in on the event.
Yeah. Oh.
And then we had Charleston Flappers and Razzmatazz, which was in an empty Hacienda building, and that was the Hacienda guys all came. Pat and Bob, or Pat Lane, I guess it really was, had gotten the Molinaros at the Pleasant transfer station to put on a thing that was bid on, which was called Dinner at the Dump. And they cleaned up the transfer station. I don't know exactly where it was held, but anyway, they cleaned it all up and had, I think, celebrities, maybe like Ken Mercer or something, serving dinner to whoever it was that won the bet. That was the big popular thing. Dinner
That was
at
the big.
dump.
Good idea. Now.
Yep.
Oh.
Had some really good ideas.
Yeah. She's a lovely lady, and
And it was fun. We had old cars. That, it was a big building, so they had these old cars that somebody had come up with. So there were fundraisers. Like I said, they earned enough that they were able to pay me $10,000 that last year. So they had put up some money, but it was nothing like it would cost $50,000 or $1 million to actually done what was done to this building.
Yeah. So I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you were mentioning that Joe Callahan would just tell his subs, or
Yeah.
would he just tell them or ask them?
Well.
Whatever, who knows, right?
People in power, people with power, do they ask or do they tell? Or do they hint?
Yes.
And I think Joe was probably more of a hinter.
Okay.
Yeah, the story, which is that there was a cocktail party that Joe had in one of the completed, probably when he had his office in completed buildings at Hacienda, and it was up on a fourth floor story, so they could see all around. And the one story in terms of getting people to work on it was the train guy who doing the air conditioners. And he kind of put his arm around him and took him over to the window, and he said, "How many train units do you see on the buildings?" And the guy said, "I don't know what the number was. We'll say 5. He said, I see 5, but I think I see 6. And the 6th one was the one that is still on the roof here at the museum, chugging away 40 years later.
So he had a way of getting people to, and there was no money ever paid to these people.
I don't know.
That
No
you
money,
know of.
no money from the
museum.
No, or the Historical Society.
Wow.
Nothing.
What a gift.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Carpenter every day for a year, full time. He didn't have any other job. His only job was to be here.
he was
do
just
things.
assigned here.
Yeah.
And Joe also helped with the Amador Theater.
Yes. Yeah.
And what did he do there?
I don't know, because I wasn't as involved in that, but I know that he was backing it. So he probably did a bunch
Some of the same
in-kind.
things.
Yeah.
And that's what he'd have his, it sounds like he'd have his subs, if you do work for me at Hacienda,
This
you've
is my
got to
pet
pay back
project.
to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And didn't they do something at the chamber? For the city. I'd heard something about, yeah. So, anyway.
They had provided some kind of funds for the chamber.
Yeah, or did some work there, some in-kind work too.
Yeah, could
Yeah,
be, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's the theater and here that I knew about.
Primarily.
And
yeah.
you'd see him at these parties, and like I was telling you, he'd come around and kiss everybody on both cheeks.
Oh, okay.
So he was a big schmoozer.
Okay.
And the guys all were treated, he had some kind of a yacht, and so the contract subs would tell me about how they would go out on Joe's yacht.
So he treated them well
Yeah,
too.
oh, yeah.
Yes. And then I understand there was kind of a men's group, an informal kind of group of men that kind of got together and made a lot of decisions about how things were going to be done and did things. You mentioned planting some trees that they were asked by the city.
Yeah, no, that had to do with the city.
Yeah.
And I had, because I had, was involved with the community and, had actively been since the beginning, I was on one of the planning
Okay. Commissions.
well, not the commission, but it was where the citizens group got together
Okay.
and we talked about, and
Yeah.
made plans, and they hired this guy, Chandler Lee, to be the coordinator. Anyway, so I was on that. So I knew a lot of city people.
Yeah.
And I was told by them how impressed the city, almost overwhelmed, the city was by Joe Callahan and the builders of Hacienda, because they were doing things much better than the city required.
Oh.
And the city, when I got here in '78, Hop Yard Road was a 2-lane road, no sidewalks, just gravel on each side. These poor little dying trees that the Lions Club had planted at one time down the middle of it. And, the Callahan came in and, all this got redone. And they went big. And my understanding is part of it was because he had done a development in San Jose, and it had not, the city had let them do things they shouldn't have. And it did not turn out well. They apparently gotten their fingers burnt on the way it sort of turned out, that people didn't like it.
Okay.
And he didn't want that to happen here. He wanted this to be a very successful project, which I think by looking at it was.
Yeah.
The only thing that didn't happen that they expected was they expected it to be much more of a business park and much less housing. They really never, in the beginning, there was no thought of having any housing there.
Yeah.
And now a lot of the property is only developed because it's been developed as housing.
Which is kind of nice. I mean, if you
Yeah.
work in the business park, to be able to live there, or,
Although I doubt that.
they've got good schools.
Yeah,
And
the other thing was that we were all supposed to get jobs because all of this employment. And it's funny, when I was working in San Francisco, I would walk to the BART station, and there would be a lady walking from the BART station. She was coming from Oakland for her job in Pleasanton, and I was going from Pleasanton to my job in San Francisco. So it didn't really turn out
Okay.
exactly the way. It didn't turn out to be the local, at least not initially. People brought their own employees, to their new home in Pleasanton rather than hiring a lot of local people. So I don't know what the percentage is now,
Yeah.
but that's kind of how it started.
Yeah.
But it was, in terms of land use and everything, it wasn't really, and the revenues to the city. It was a definite win-win.
Yeah.
And you can't have everything.
Yeah. So when was this turned into? Oh, you had mentioned, I think, that the storage was added on in the 90s.
Yeah, it was Dagmar had gotten that done.
And do we know who did that?
City paid for it.
Okay, the city paid for that.
Mhm.
Okay. So
And how the magic of which it was done, I don't know.
yeah, but this is a city building.
Yes,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean
No.
the city didn't do any of the renovation on it either.
Right.
We were, the agreement was we would pay them $1 a year rent, and then they would take care, one of the really big things was that they paid all the utility bills. So that big train, we never paid for the electricity for that. And they also would do the grounds,
Yeah.
so we didn't have to do any of the landscaping.
Okay.
I was going to say also, in terms of construction, we wanted the building to look as much as we could like the 1915 building. So one of the problems was that sometime, I don't know if the city did it or the police, they had taken out the big long wooden frame windows, probably rotted out, and put in these small aluminum ones. So we got rid of those.
Okay.
And the contractors built the windows that we have now. I didn't want to have blinds because that wasn't traditional, as we could tell from the photo of the library. So we had big a blind, pull down.
Oh, shades.
Shades, that's the word,
Yeah.
So we had these big shades put in.
Okay.
I like the stuff that they're using now. It's much more practical, but we were trying to go for historical.
Yeah.
And the other thing was that we had to get rid of all that ivy. Now, you would think you have an ivy-covered building. It's a brick building with a tile roof covered in ivy. Disaster, right? You're waiting to eat this building away.
Right.
So, that's the first thing that we had to do, was to get rid of that. And you would be amazed at how many people came in complaining, "Oh, you took the ivy off. I love the ivy."
Oh.
Sorry. But the other thing that was interesting was as soon as the building, so the ivy got off, as soon as the building was painted, we got more interest in terms of the whole project.
Oh.
So that's a tip for people that are trying to raise money. If you can get your facade looking nice.
Looking nicer.
Yeah. Curb appeal,
Yeah.
as they say in real estate.
Yes. Well, and I know there have been changes over the time because we're talking about up to 1987.
Right.
And there's been painting done and different carpets put in, things like that. How do you like what has been done?
I don't know. I mean, this room, they had somebody come in and redesign it.
Right.
I've noticed that there's been some changes. One of the things I really like that they did, and I don't see that being repeated, is they had this tablet with the Sanborn maps on it.
Oh,
Which I always thought that was a shame that, I didn't even realize the museum had them. They obviously acquired them after I left. I got a number of them from UC Berkeley myself. But
and when you talk about the Sanborn maps,
these were the insurance maps that were drawn that show all the buildings in town and what they were, at the time. So starting in 1888 and going up through 1953. So that was nice.
Yes.
To have that. And I heard from people that had come in and used them. And I don't know. I know that the museum in the past has had trouble with with tablets and stuff, that they get abused and they can't use them anymore. But that was a good thing. The thing that I told Ken at one point was, I said, the exhibits, they started under Jim Mishman. Jim was involved in a group that put together exhibits and then rented them out. And that's when the museum stopped doing their own exhibits. All my exhibits, I did 3 a year, were all original. And they were all from
homemade,
local stuff.
Yeah.
And but so we started getting these
Some of the
paid for.
Smithsonian,
Yeah. Well, not
traveling.
the Smithsonian. It was this
Other group, yeah.
Yeah. It
But
was
some
this
traveling,
museum thing. Anyway, they were buying. They were essentially renting exhibits, and I always felt that was kind of silly. It was the kind of things that banks do, not that a legitimate museum does. The other thing was that they didn't, I don't know what they're doing now, but for a lot of those, they just had that exhibit and that was it. Now, Beverly Lane, the museum in the San Ramon Valley, she would rent an exhibit, but then she'd have all these local people come in and supplement it with a whole bunch of local stuff. And I felt that would have been a much better thing. Anyway, so what I was thinking was, why not make this more, expand the archive? Because it's very difficult to use the archive. I noticed peeking in there now that you've got big
We have so
baskets
little
and stuff.
space, yes.
Yeah. To just, turn the fireplace room into an archive, or the other way around. You could have this as the kind of permanent exhibit, or have that as a permanent exhibit, and then expand your archive and make it a research center.
Yeah.
So that people could come in and actually do research. The story was that people liked the changing exhibits, and I don't know. I'm 40 years out from
Yeah.
being curator, so
Yeah.
I don't know what Pleasanton people like.
But we do need a research center because we just keep, of course, accumulating archival stuff, and what do you do with it? And it's so important that we keep it protected and preserve it correctly.
Right.
Which you had started doing.
You had one of the directors at one point, I can't remember her name, she always struck me as being kind of a flim-flam artist. Anyway, she was saying, we can't have these wooden cabinets, and the temperature's not correct. Well, I was an archivist for the bankrupt library, which meant that I belonged to the California Society of Archivists. And we used to go around to everybody's facilities. And most of the people did not have the book correct thing. But in fact, I was at the Hermitage Museum a couple of years back, and I said to one of the docents there, I said, well, how do you do your climate control? She said, oh, well, when it gets hot, we open the windows. This is the Hermitage.
Oh, my goodness, yes,
So you don't have to be perfect.
yes,
You just have to be pretty good.
yes.
And those, I mean, the stuff's in acid-free folders, it's in acid-free boxes.
Yeah,
You could put down a barrier at the bottom if you wanted to. I always thought of doing that, but I never had the money to do it. But it's, 40 years. Even P101 is doing fine.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I think the strength of this would be as a research
Yeah.
center.
And that's what we want to do more,
Oh,
because
good.
we've had, research, but
Can I
it's
vote for
been
that?
getting more difficult, yes.
As
yeah.
a citizen.
Yeah, well, and you like to research. I mean,
Oh, sure.
definitely history. Because,
Well, plus I've got how many gigabytes of information that should go somewhere,
yeah.
but I don't have anywhere for it to go at this point. It's all digitized.
Yeah.
Copies of books and maps and information that I've gleaned from talking to people over the last 30 years.
Well, it sounds like something that we'd really like, at some point. Yeah.
But, if it's just going to go, someplace that nobody can use it.
No, yeah, and you don't want that.
I promised to tell you the story of the Pleasanton Downtown Association.
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, when was it? It must have been maybe like 85. It was after we had been open we opened in June 8th, I think I looked it up, June 18th, 1985.
Okay.
This building opened. So it may have been 86. So I was approached by Pat Lane, or it was the chamber that was in those buildings. I'm sorry, it wasn't the Downtown Association. It was the chamber, but I think they were in with the chamber. Anyway, the Pleasanton Downtown Association was looking for a home, and Pat Lane was the head of it at the time. And of course, I knew her from her involvement with the museum. So she said, is there any way that we can have some space in the museum? And so it's in the archive. We still had room in the archives. We didn't have those file cabinets in there at that time. So she said, all I've got is a roll-top desk. That's all I need, and a phone. And that's all the room I'll take up. And I thought, well, it's kind of like having the gallery. I thought hopefully this would bring in traffic.
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, okay. So we set her up there, and that's how the Downtown Association became.
Okay, yeah, because I know Pat said she had
to be here.
officed in that room. Yes, yes. So who would you give a lot of credit to for putting this museum together? I mean, certainly to you. I mean, that you planned it and you
Spent a year of my life.
spent a year of your life, yes. But who are some of the other big players that you would thank if they were here, for...
Well, Dagmar
Okay.
for making those connections, and Bill Apperson. I think he was not as obvious
Yeah.
person, but he was
But he was influential, I
Right,
think,
yeah.
and partly because of who he was, as well. Yeah.
So I'd say that, and then it would be Callahan Hills, in terms of supporting it. And then once you get something kind of going, then you attract people. So I was doing oral interviews at the time. One of the things that I did kind of during the transition period, because there weren't any exhibits to put on, I wasn't really
Right.
doing anything. There wasn't really any reason to do anything at the old museum,
Right.
because we were moving stuff out of there anyway. One of the things that I decided was that I would do some oral interviews. I had some time to do them. And I had this wonderful woman, I cannot remember her name now, but she came in one day, sort of what can I, I'm interested in helping out, what can I do? And she said that she was a medical transcriptionist.
Oh.
So transcriptions. Because I knew from the Bancroft Library that oral interviews are just fine. And we had a lot here, things that were done before it was a museum, where it was just kind of a social club,
Okay.
historical society, more social. They would have these talks, and we had recordings of them, old timers in Snow talking about Snow. But there was no visual, you didn't know who was talking all the time.
Yeah.
And there was no, way you could kind of study it. You just had to listen 14 times to get the information. So this gal said, I'm a transcription from heaven. So I said, I've got these tapes. Would you please transcribe them for me? And so she did. And that was great. We had another thing where I had an exhibit. We wanted to do a quilt exhibit. And we had this lady, again, it's in my files, but I don't remember her name. She was this nationally famous kind of Grandma Moses style painter who just happened to live in Pleasanton. And she came in and she said, I would like to do something, with the museum. Well, we're thinking of putting on a quilt show and we're having people bring in their family quilts. And she said, I will do painting. I'll get the stories behind the quilts and I'll do paintings from the stories. So she did these original oils of the story. There was one about them shaking out the thing, and she had the people all shaking out the quilts, and they were gorgeous. I did take, hopefully the museum has still found room for them, but every exhibit that I did, I went around and took photographs. So there are photographs in the files of that exhibit, and you can see those beautiful paintings.
What happened to the paintings?
Well, they were her property, and she did have them if somebody wanted to buy them. I think she probably thought that maybe some of the families would buy them.
Yeah.
And I'm really surprised they didn't, but, Pleasanton was still fairly cheap in those days, and she wasn't charging, $15 for a painting. She was charging a couple of hundred, which was money in those days. And so, as far as I think, maybe one family bought one, but essentially she just took them. And I actually saw them, or saw one of them in a gallery in San Francisco years later.
Oh.
That was one of the cool things. So she was just, they were gorgeous paintings. And anybody that, had a feeling for quilts or, kind of family history would, I'm sure would love to have it in their home.
Yeah. So many lovely stories about people that really just volunteered and came.
Yeah. And then Mary Jane Cooney and Pat Conley.
And what did they do?
Oh, well, they were my big volunteers. I had volunteers, but those two were my, absolutely guaranteed regular gals. They came in every day. We were open and did whatever needed to be done. If we needed to change the exhibit, we needed wallpaper, they would do the wallpapering.
It's just everything.
Yeah.
Oh.
And as I said, that's why Mary Jane was able to. And I don't think Pat really kind of wanted a lead role. Mary Jane was more outgoing and sort of took to it. So they were, for a couple of years at least, the ones that were running the museum as volunteers. That was an interesting gal. Her dad was involved with the Naval Air Station during World War II.
Yeah.
And he came home one day and said...
Now, are we talking Camp Parks or what are we talking?
No, we're talking the lab.
Oh, okay.
What became the lab.
Okay.
So her dad came home one day and said, I'm bringing home this flight instructor to dinner. And it was Robert Taylor.
Oh.
Who, if you read, was a flight instructor.
I didn't know that, yeah.
So she had been, I hadn't realized that she had been around Pleasanton that long, but yes, she was a old-timer. And, we had old-timers coming in. I had people, donating stuff. Joanne Meany gave me some films that the JCs had taken in the 30s and 40s, and I had them converted to VHS tape at the time. It was just, 16 millimeter home movies. And we still have them in the collection. I think they may have been digitized by this time, but they're wonderful movies.
And that is one of the problems when technology changes,
Right.
we really have to change our stuff too, or we don't get to,
To view
the
them.
benefit of,
Yeah.
viewing them and such. You had mentioned that Joe Callahan had a carpenter here every day that the museum was open for.
Well, not every day, just 5 days a week.
5 days, when the museum was open, yeah,
When the museum was under construction
okay,
for that year.
for that year.
Uh-huh.
Who directed him? Were you the one who directed him and what you wanted done?
No, it was the various contractors
Oh,
from.
so they would just kind of come and tell him
Yeah,
what
to do.
what projects
he'd,
were.
Yeah, or he'd get his instructions from them. And then they would, well, sometimes they wouldn't tell him. We had some situations where they ordered something that was the wrong size and he had to do it. So it was really handy having him because he could, if anything was needed tweaking, he could tweak it for us.
Yeah. So did Joe come in and see what work was being done? Did he?
No,
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't do any hands. I don't think he did any hands-on with the
Okay.
theater either.
Okay. But some of his people got these directed the other people.
Yeah. There was like two guys. One was from Washington State, and they were with this company. I keep on wanting to say Can-Am, but that was the plumbing.
Yeah,
That was
the
Frank
plumbing.
Capilla's plumbing. It was something like that. It was Calanon or something. It's in here. Anyway. But there were two kind of like leads, and they're the ones like in designing the exhibit, the platform exhibits. They're the guys that I talked to and figured it out and actually directed the construction. And some of the carpenter did in terms of putting it in. Some of it they had prefab, so they just brought it.
It must have been exciting for you during that time. Yeah.
Well, the whole project. I mean, as I say, I had been doing a number of things at the Bancroft,
Yeah.
but when I was, running a museum, even the one on the fairgrounds, I used to tell people that I was doing things that I never knew how to do. I mean, I was really flying by the seat
your
of my
pants,
pants,
so to speak. Yeah.
and making it up as I was going along. But, so it was an extremely exciting time, and the fact that we could take over, from being, out there into the middle of town was, of course, a big thing. I mean, I never would have gotten these kind of walk-in visitors if we were fixing up the building in the fairgrounds.
Right.
They
Yeah.
would have come.
Yeah.
Our visibility was
I mean, even the third
fantastic.
grade classes, they didn't come to the
No,
fairgrounds, did they?
That was all these traveling exhibits that went out to them.
Yeah.
We kept those, despite the fact that, we now had a facility where people could come to, better facility for people to come to. But they kind of, died out. Olive, like I say, Olive Hannafin was kind of, had always been the godmother of that. And, when she retired, stopped volunteering, got old enough, she stopped volunteering, then it kind of sort of fell by the wayside. It was still going on when I left in '87, but I had, the thing that was added was that I would have like Browning troops and other organizations come in, which was something that we had never had outreach to before.
Yeah.
And so those were the kind of groups where I would set them down in what's now the store area and talk to them about, what we were learning, and then open up big doors to reveal
Yeah.
the exhibit.
Yeah.
A little bit of drama for the kids.
And then we went for years without a marker out front that said it was the museum.
Right, that was something that Dagmar had wanted from the beginning.
And why didn't it happen then?
The city had to do it. The city had to pay for it. And, well, the Christmas tree, of course, was on that side.
Yeah.
Before. Well, it was here, and then that tree got so misshapen that they finally cut it down. And then they planted the one that's over where the marker is now.
Okay.
And so it was in the way for years and years, and now that space was only opened up when they moved back. So the thing that I had to market, obviously I wanted something, we couldn't have a sign out in front, but I wanted something that was noticeable. So over the front doors, there had been just this plain piece of window pane, glass.
Okay.
And I thought, well, let's make that our sign.
Okay.
So another, person walking in the door, Marcin Rivera, Gertrude Rivera,
Yep.
comes in. She says, "Oh, I've got connections with the stained glass company. I'll design the sign for you, and they'll make it. Again, completely free. No money's changed hands for that beautiful sign that she did." I had another guy that came when we were demoing the building. His name was Bill Randall, and he lived in Livermore, but he had his grandmother, I think, had been an early settler in the area. And so he came looking at old wood, and I said, "Oh, you're a woodworker, and we need a sign to commemorate the people that are making donations." We sold airspace. I still have the certificate that my parents bought. So somewhere in here, my parents own a square foot of airspace.
Yeah.
I'm going to come take it back.
That was a good fundraiser.
Yeah, that worked good.
Yeah.
Sold bricks from when they tore down 450 Main. And so I said, I want a plaque for people that donate, a certain amount. And so he said, okay. So he did a carving. The museum must have it somewhere. I will buy it back if you're not going to use it.
Okay.
A carving of the front of the building.
Oh.
Beautiful carving of that. And then we had a plaque. We actually had to he had to carve us a second plaque because we had so many names. And then we had one of these trophy places donated. Fortunately, they were stick-on, not the drill-on, little plaques with the names of everybody that donated. I think it was $100 more.
I wonder where that is. Yeah.
I was told that it's in the back.
Okay.
But as I say, if the museum's not going to use that doodle carving by Bill Randall, another Easter egg, he put his mother's name or his grandmother's name on the back.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, having it much nicer than the bookshop out there now.
Yeah.
For donations.
Yeah.
Plus all these people that it's kind of like the Sandy Thorne. It's very nice that you named it after a long-time volunteer. But that's the Rotary Group. I mean, that wouldn't be there without the Rotary. And we had their plaque in there.
Why without the Rotary?
They're the ones that paid for it. All the, I was telling you, all
that's
that
right.
cabinetry,
Yes.
the
They paid
map
for it.
case, the
Ah.
fixed light fixtures, the table, everything was a donation from the Rotary Club.
And that's where history is important. And right?
Right.
Writing it down so that we know that and we don't make those kinds of mistakes.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that was a huge gift from the Rotary.
Oh, yeah. And it was just a club, and it's one thing, you've got the developer of Hacienda Business Park. Yes,
Yeah.
put in thousands of dollars, but this was just the local Rotary Club, and especially this carpenter. I don't think he's around anymore, but boy, he did a gorgeous job.
Yeah, they're beautiful pieces. Oh, okay. Well,
Go get that plaque. That plaque
Yeah.
is somewhere. We had the Rotary plaque in there for years and years.
yeah, I'm going to have to ask about that. Yeah. Any other stories or things that you'd like to share with us, Anne, while we're...
About the museum? Well, there was a lot of generosity in the community in terms of things that were loaned to us or exhibits. There was an Indian exhibit. I wanted to put on an Indian exhibit. And Jack Colin, as it turned out, was something of a collector. And so he loaned me all kinds of stuff. And then again, you know, you're visible, and so people are attracted to you. We had another couple, I think they were from Livermore, and they were like rock hounds and collectors. And they had gone all over the Southwest collecting Indian-related items. I mean, not necessarily California Indian, but baskets and arrowheads and all kinds of materials. And they donated it to us outright. I actually went to the Kroger Museum at Berkeley, and the generosity there, I was really impressed. You know, I just called this guy up and said, look, I'm the curator of this museum. We've got a collection of basketry. I don't know what all of it is. I'm not an expert in basketry. You are. You know, if I brought some, can you help me out? So I just took a carload of baskets there, and he went through with me and said, you know, this is raffia. This is a kit that somebody bought in the 20s and put together, and this is authentic.
The difference, yeah.
And so I've got all of this, you know, kind of wonderful information from them. We participated in a Oakland Museum put together thing, something that was like a museum month or event, and we were part of that too. So we were listed in their catalog right next to the Oakland Museum. We were.
So you really started making it more visible in the community, and bringing it downtown also really helped create that.
And the fact that we had this, you know, great backing that allowed us to, you know, even though it took a year, it would have taken, you know, a century to do it with, you know, those little donations.
Yeah.
And you find that with all this stuff. I mean, for instance, the building itself, the Women's Improvement Club, they had the land, which I think probably was donated to them. There was a family that owned this. They were butchers. And there was a house, and then the butcher shop, which was the thing they turned into their little reading room. And I've got a feeling it was Martin and this lady, I think probably, she was a Women's Improvement Club member, and I've got a feeling that she just donated or willed the land to the Women's Improvement Club. I doubt if anybody paid for it. But then, so the Women's Improvement Club had the land, and then the city built the building. And the same thing with the sign, which was the Women's Improvement Club, did have a fundraiser for the sign. And there was even articles.
For a museum sign?
No, for the sign of our history.
Yes,
In 32. So there were like little boxes at the pharmacy and other business around town where you could put your donation in for the sign, but they didn't earn enough to actually build the sign. So the city stepped in and finished it off. So Doris Benson used to tell me the city always comes in at the end. And they did for the utilities for us, but they were lucky with us because they didn't have to, you know, other than, I say, the landscaping and paying the utility bills, they didn't have to do anything.
Any of the renovations, yeah, which would have been
towards it. It's fine us them giving us the building, but they would have taken it back and you know, rented it out, which was also one of the options, was that the city could rent it as office space.
Well, I'm glad they left it as a museum. It's really beautiful. So, does that kind of wind up things, or Anna, or are there some other things you'd like to? Okay.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting talking with you, and that you were here during that whole renovation is just really important. So, that was very good.
I've finally become one of the old timers I used to interview.
Yeah. So thank you ever so much. We really appreciate it. All right.